Devotion. What does it mean to be devoted to someone? What does it mean to be devoted to God? As I was contemplating those questions, I remembered the story about a girl named Ruth. And the remarkable thing about Ruth is she was devoted to her mother-in-law, of all people, when times were really tough. If you're not familiar with the story, it starts in the land of Israel. And Naomi and her husband decided that they were going to travel to another land where they thought the economy would be better. So they left town, they left home, went to this new place, not the land that God had given them, but a new place. And they went out on their own to start the family business there and hopefully have a successful life. And while they were there, their two sons grew up and got married. And they married two women of the land. Now, not the nice Jewish girls that they were supposed to marry culturally, but two young ladies from that land. And for a while, things seemed to be going okay. But then Naomi's husband sadly passed away. And to make matters worse, both her sons tragically died premature deaths. And these three women, the mother and her two daughters-in-law, they were left together in this land with no means to provide for themselves, with no way to have any security. And in those difficult circumstances, Naomi made a strategic decision. She decided she was going to go back to her homeland, back to her countrymen, back to the place that God had called the people of Israel to live. So she gathered her two daughters-in-law, whom she loved very much, and she said, it's time for me to go back home. Why don't you stay here, and maybe you can find new husbands. Go back to your own families, and maybe you'll be able to find new husbands and get new security and move on with your lives, even though our lives have been so tragic. So Naomi began to travel, and her daughters-in-law went with her. And when they got to the border, Naomi again said, look, girls, it's time for you to go back home. I need to make this trip. I need to do this, but you need to stay. I can't have new children for you to marry. I don't have any other sons to give you. I have no way to take care of you. You can't really take care of me. We need to move on. And finally, tearfully, crying together, one of the daughters-in-law said, okay, I'll go home. But Ruth clung to Naomi and said, Naomi, I am not going to leave you. In fact, her expression of devotion was extreme. It was radical. Let me read to you what Ruth said to Naomi at this time. This is after Naomi's tried to convince her that it makes more sense for her to go back home. Ruth tells her, very clear language, very plainly. You can't misunderstand this at all. Ruth says, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, Naomi, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Naomi, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if anything but death separates you and me. And to that, Naomi had no response. That was such an amazing expression of devotion. Naomi conceded and said, okay, let's go together. And Naomi and Ruth make that journey back to Naomi's home. And they get there and the people go, wow, is that Naomi? It's been so many years. Is that really you? And Naomi says, yeah, but don't even call me Naomi anymore because I'm so bitter about how my life has turned out. She was so upset and so distraught. You see, Ruth wasn't sticking with Naomi because things were going to be easy. Ruth wasn't sticking with Naomi because times were fine. No, this was a difficult time. They were experiencing the storms of life. And yet Ruth stuck with Naomi anyway. And I was floored by this amazing devotion that Ruth was expressing to Naomi, that Ruth lived out with Naomi. Well, to make a long story short, there is a happy ending to this story. Ruth actually finds a relative of Naomi who decides to marry her, who's actually quite wealthy and is able to provide security for their family. And not only that, but Ruth becomes a great grandparent of the future King David of Israel. And more important than that, Ruth actually becomes an ancestor of the Messiah, Jesus. And it all started with her devotion to Naomi. And I thought, wow, if Ruth is that devoted to Naomi, I get a picture of what devotion's like. So am I that devoted to God? Can I be that devoted to God? The Bible says in a little bit later, after the time of Ruth in 1 Chronicles, when the charge is coming to David's son Solomon to build the temple, David says, "And you, my son Solomon, acknowledge the God of your father and serve him with wholehearted devotion and a willing mind." Well, I was thinking, what does that wholehearted devotion mean? I think it means how Ruth stuck with Naomi. And we need to be devoted to God no matter what. Times might be hard. They might be difficult. Things might not be going the way we expected. We might be disappointed with life for a time. But we need to have that kind of devotion to God that Ruth had for Naomi. Because when we do, I think we'll find out that God will not let us down. Be devoted to Him.